Good job, Cindy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hold on, we need to get this working. That's the recorder.
Okay. Good. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday, March 7th meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. And we will start with public announcements.
Minutes, Mr. Daly's already called me about one I should have changed from a denial to an approval.
Okay.
Well, let's make that as hard as possible. Oh. There we go.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
All right. With that, we will move on to agenda item number 1, approval of the prior MAPC meeting minutes from February 21st, 2019.
Move we approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green, a second by Mr. Blick, and a question by Mr. Foster.
Yes, on page 18, it references Warren moved, Green seconded the motion, and it failed 9-4. Should that be passed?
Yes,
9-4.
that
Okay.
we did note that change, and Mr. Daly brought that to the attention as well.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries 11-0. Moving on to agenda item number 2. Item 2-1, sub 2018 00046, final plat, Indian Ridge at Andell Addition. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody from the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take that item on consent.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Mr. Klossmeyer, a second by Mr. Richardson. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 11-0. All right. We have no vacation items, so we'll move on to case number 4. Oh, sorry. I misquoted. Case number CON 2019-00002. I really like those triple zeros instead. City conditional use for a wireless communication facility. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Mr. Foster, we will hear this case. I,
That's the one they want deferred.
oh, they want it deferred?
Yeah, to April.
Okay, number 5 or number
Yeah.
4? Okay, so we're gonna defer
April 19th.
case number CON 2019-00003 to April 19th? 18th. All right, moving on to agenda item number 6, case number CUP 2019-00003, City Community Unit Plan Amendment to CUP DP 329 to allow for a car wash. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take that item on consent. Agenda item number 7, case number ZON 2019-0002, city zone change from SF5 to NO. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that would like to hear this case? Okay, we will hear this case. Agenda item number 8, case number ZON 2019-00003. Oh, deferral date to be determined. That's gonna be April 4th. I don't have that on my papers.
Madam Chair, if I could, that case has yet to be submitted. There was an error in the original draft of the agenda, so the deferral date has yet to be determined, and I will
Okay.
send that out as soon as we
Okay,
know.
so the deferral, okay, it is yet to be determined. All right. Agenda item number 9, case number ZON 2019-00004, city zone change from LI to CBD district for redevelopment. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody from the audience that would like to hear this case? Okay, we will take that item on consent. Agenda item number 10, case number ZON 2019-00005, city zone change of 28 lots in Reserve F from SF5 to TF3. Is there anybody on the commission that would like to hear this case?
I will recuse myself from that item.
Thank you, Mr. Klossmeyer.
I
Mr.
should
Foster.
note, I need to recuse on item 9 as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll take that item on consent.
Motion to approve 6, 9, and 10.
Second.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Blick, a second by Mr. Hartman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So we will go back and, Mr. Year Out, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Dave Yearout with planning staff. This is the conditional use request, essentially from Mr. Ferris through and on behalf of T-Mobile for an 80-foot wireless communication facility located on property that is on the north side of 18th Street North and will be on the west side of Woodland Avenue at 902 West 18th Street. You can see outlined in blue the subject property, which is the leased area on the commercial property that sits on the corner of that intersection. We're on the northwest corner of the intersection. You can tell from the zoning, we have LC commercial in all 4 directions. The rest of the property surrounding the neighborhood is zone TF3 two-family. This is an aerial photo showing the location. You can see the existing building on the lot, and the tower will be proposed to be within the compound roughly where the aerial is shown on the map. This is the land use for the area. It's discussed in the staff report. This is the preliminary site drawing that was provided. The new location is actually closer to where the arrow is located at that location. An aerial photo showing roughly where this tower will be. It's located, this is the block building that is on the lot commercially that was most recently owned by or operated as a repair business, auto repair. And the location of the tower would roughly be right here about where the A is. That's the property to the north. And looking northwest, this is also a zoned LC. This was a commercial business, and this is a house that's at the backside of that LC's lot. This is looking north along Woodland, looking east across Woodland from at the property across the street, looking to the southeast. Again, even though this is a house, it is all zoned LC, looking directly south from the subject's property. This is looking east along 18th Street. We're back looking north at the site, looking west along 18th Street. Staff has gone through and identified that this is in conformance with the requirements of the Unified Zoning Code. It complies with all the setback requirements. It meets the spirit and intent of what the wireless communication plan says, and we're recommending approval. Be happy to answer any questions you've got.
Richardson.
Dave, do you have a aerial or a map that can show us the recent location that was turned down by the city commission and how far away this is from that?
Well, the most recent location was
it 13th and the river?
13th and River. So
we're not very far away from that.
no. And the agents here, I think, to talk about this is an intent to have a tower that will provide the same service that they're after within this area. I think the agent could address that.
Have the DAB board,
The DAB heard this on Monday and unanimously recommended denial.
Other questions from the commission? All right, seeing none, we'll ask agent or applicant to step forward. Please state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent APC Towers. And with me today from T-Mobile is a couple of their site acquisition representatives, as well as their RF engineer, if you have some specific questions regarding those types of things. I don't remember which planning commissioner asked. I think it was Mr. Richardson asked about the other tower. We did seek a tower down along 13th Street. City Council rejected that, and in their rejection, they cited its proximity to the historic properties of Manissa Bridge and some other issues there. There may have been some other factors, but those were the primary factors for the rejection. So when I was tasked with finding a substitute location, I went to many different locations. I talked to a couple churches. We actually thought we were going to be able to go on the North High property. Actually submitted it as a candidate, was approved by T-Mobile. The school district decided they did not want to release any ground for a tower, so they rejected that. So that site was out of the option. When I looked at the tower on 13th Street, the neighbors suggested that I should look at 13th Street. I wasn't aware of the depth of the commercial zoning, So when we went back and looked, I was able to find a location that wasn't directly behind a house. It was instead behind a building and between two commercial properties. So we felt like this was going to be an adequate location. So we pursued this location and got a lease. State law no longer allows the local jurisdictions to consider the need for the tower, but we still submitted radio frequency plots that show why we need this tower. I wanted to be thorough and make sure, even though state law doesn't require you to consider that, I certainly felt like I had the option to give you that information so that you would be able to make the most educated decision you could. So we submitted to showing that there's a need. Also, you're not allowed to consider alternate sites. But in my narrative and in my discussion today, I'm telling you that we looked thoroughly through this area to try to find another site that would be appropriate to be able to serve Riverside. This appears to us to be the most friendly site to be able to do that. We've lowered the site to an 80-foot tower. I'll remind the Planning Commission that 80-foot tall structures are allowed by right in limited commercial zoning. This would meet the compatibility setback, so if this was an 80-foot tall building, it would be allowed by right without any zoning, so that we feel that the 80-foot is an appropriate height. It is also the height that the RF engineer has determined is what is required. While I've told you a few things you're not allowed to consider, you certainly must consider those review criteria that are in the zoning code. I'd like to go through those and make sure you understand how we believe that those certainly meet the criteria. I think staff has identified 3 of those. We concur with those. We believe the character of the neighborhood, if you see in that area, there's a mix of use of commercial, of residential uses and office uses. So we believe it's a mixed use area. And as a result of that, we believe that it's appropriate for this type of use. Also, if I can, let's see if I can get to those. See if I can get to those photos. I would point out to you that along 18th Street, there are 55 to 60 foot existing poles in the right of way. We're going to be approximately 20 feet taller than these, so we believe, again, as you consider the character of the neighborhood, that's an important thing to consider, so we believe that also. Staff has identified the suitability of the subject property as one of their, we would agree with that. The extent of the removal restrictions detrimentally affect nearby properties. I want to address that a little bit. We'll have people at hearings come forward and say, we're in the real estate business and we know that towers affect real property. There's not been a court yet that has determined that that's accurate. We will also submit to you that if you try to go to the appraiser's office and tell them that you should have their property value reduced, they will not do that unless you can prove that has done that. And to my knowledge, in Wichita, no one has been able to demonstrate that a tower has devalued their property. There are towers that are closer to this, to residentially zoned property in Wichita, many locations, and we cannot find where that property has been devalued. So while anybody can say that this property, and they believe that, no one has yet produced information that is able to be verified and justified even in a court. So we believe that there is no detrimental impact to the area. Again, especially with the electric poles that are in the area, we're not going to be significantly different than those. This property has been vacant for a significant period of time, so we believe we meet that criteria as well. The relatively gain to public health and safety, we think that there's an enormous gain to this area. Everybody knows now that wireless communication is not only for making a cell phone call, but it also is for internet access. You can go to a carrier for $40 or $50 a month. You can get phone service. You can get unlimited internet service at a 4G and soon to be 5G speed, which makes it much cheaper than going to a lot of the other alternatives. So we believe there's an enormous public gain to that aspect. We also believe that that people have a right in their homes to be able to use these types of devices. And so by doing that, we are actually having a gain to a very large number of people. If you look at some of the reports that the engineers provided you that show the volume of people that are using this in this area and why the capacity is needed to be offset, we think that is demonstrated as well. The conformance to the plans, we believe that staff has identified that. If you go through the wireless plan, we've created a monopole. We've done it in a color that is a neutral color. There's a building and trees that hide parts of the tower, which is also part of that. We believe that if you go through the wireless plan, we'll find that this does that in a great amount of ways. There is no impact on community facilities. Towers generate very little traffic, so there's no negative to the community facilities. We also don't use water and sewer, so there's no impact in that regard. So we believe we also meet that criteria. I will tell you that there is organized opposition support, so we will not claim that we have the support of the neighborhood residents. But we also, the last item is consideration of professional staff. Your staff has recommended approval today. So I think when you look at the body of what you are supposed to look at when you are evaluating a tower, that we meet the criteria as laid out in the zoning code and also in the golden rules, and therefore we believe this tower is appropriate in this location. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Click.
Greg, let me get this right. On this chart right here, it says voice and data traffic and area. So in 2017-18, it went down maybe 1,000, but then in data, it's tripled.
That's correct, sir. And that's really what's happening in the industry. And my wife won't make phone calls anymore. She uses text, but she's on, Twitter. She's on pulling down stuff off the internet on a regular basis. And that's what most people are now doing. They're using the phone less to call and more for the data services. And to be able to have the data that's required, we need to have this tower. T-Mobile is on several towers in this area. There's one at 21st and Waco, and you can see those are on your map. There's one at Twin Lakes. There's a rooftop over near Oak Park. I can't remember where the other one is. I think there's one on 18th Street, Broadway and 18th. So those towers now have reached capacity levels. If you have some, questions and like to have an education on RF engineering, we happen to have one here today and be glad to do that. I don't know if you're that interested, so I won't go into the details, but be happy to if you need that.
That was a question I had, is it, the benefit of it is it looks like it's going to serve 3 times as much for data-wise, and it's a growing thing, and so that's a question I just had, is the benefit of it.
Foster?
Several questions. Please confirm, when we last had a discussion relative to North High, my understanding is they were getting out of the business of having the towers on their properties. Is that correct?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. I represent the school district. I want to fully disclose that. And so, I'm negotiating with Verizon on, for example, the Hadley Tower. The Hadley Tower is in a location that the school district feels is okay for them, and so they're moving forward with that. At North High, however, I talked to them about rebuilding that tower, about moving it. We're going to move it up to the north end of the property. And like I said, we actually went through that process with them, got to where we were ready to start talking about a lease, and they decided they no longer wanted to do that. The reason that they don't want to have a new tower where their old tower is it's right up to an area where their building is and also near their ball fields, and they think that if they ever want to do any expansion or have it, they needed that area to do it, which is the reason why they asked us to go north. We did. So this district isn't totally getting out of the tower business. They have some towers that are not suitable for co-location because they weren't built strong enough to handle antenna arrays. I think the towers that they have that may handle that, like at Hadley, maybe one at the old Southeast, maybe one at Northwest, if I'm trying to remember the ones we've talked about in our meetings. Those may be suitable for co-location without rebuilding. So the school district may or may not be favorable of rebuilding towers. They weren't at the North High location. That was the issue at North. Marshall's a bit of a tight site. They weren't interested in leasing any ground there because they don't really have enough ground space to give up, for one, and two, they felt like that might create some neighborhood animosity, and they didn't want to do that as well.
Second question is, in the letter from Mr. Reese, he notes T-Mobile is requesting an antenna rad center of 75 feet. I assume that's not the height. That's why it's
The
pushing.
way that a
feet,
rad
but-
center, and if you look at, you'll see a diagram, it shows the, what a tower looks like. You will see the rad center is slightly lower than the top of the tower because the antenna arrays go, so the rad center is the center of those antennas, and the antennas go up another 4 or 5 feet. And so as a rad center 75, you need to get permission to do 80 feet, or you're in violation of your conditional use because you've only asked for 75.
Third question is, confirm the heights of the telephone poles in the area. I was
There, I couldn't, I
40,
tried to
50.
shoot them, and my thing isn't accurate to exact, so it's somewhere between 55 and 60 feet tall.
Foster, they're 56 feet.
Well, I was pretty close, thank you.
Just one final question, just kind of an observation. On the graphic that we received in our report, down at the bottom, it says drawing not to scale. I would suggest in the future to provide a true representation. If you go to the effort to scale this off, the height is only 2/3 of what the actual height would be. It's only showing about a 57-foot height compared
You're
to.
talking about this drawing?
Yes.
The reason we do that, and that's why we also provided you this drawing, this photo. This photo is 80 feet, so I took off the top 20 feet, it's a 100-foot tower. So that gives you an exact representation. So the idea is to show you what a tower is and where the antenna arrays are, but the photo was to give you the exact representation.
I'm actually talking about the diagram.
Okay, I understand, and I'm glad to do that in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson.
Mr. Ferris, we hear, we've talked about cell towers here on numerous occasions, and we've heard from staff about how these towers have the right to go in public rights of way and all kinds of other places that nobody has anything to say about. Are there possibilities that kind of help us understand what does that mean? Does that mean a street right of way? Does that? That
There's a
comes from the
new,
state
there's a new
legislature.
state law that regulates public rights of way. And they, and Scott can probably tell you more about this than I can, but I'll try, and then Scott can correct the mistakes I make. These are mainly for more small cell stuff. They're going in there with 40-foot, 30 to 40-foot, and they're doing small cells. Small cell, for example, will penetrate a building within 60 to 100 yards. When you get outside of that, you really don't have coverage. They're using small cells, for example, in Oklahoma City at Bricktown, where they put them on, and you have masses of people so that they get coverage. To date, right now in Wichita and in most areas where there are residential houses, they're not using small cell. T-Mobile hasn't been using them in this area, and I'm working a little with Verizon, AT&T. I haven't seen them. Sprint, to some degree, is using some small cell. But it's not being proliferated through Wichita at this time. So you could go in the right of way, and you can do that. Rebuild one of those poles, for example, and you work with KG&E. But one of the issues then is the small cell takes a little bit different type of ground equipment, where what we use to get the volume that needs to go to penetrate a building, you have to have power. And so we use bigger radios. So there really isn't often enough right-of-way to build those kind of things in the right-of-way. So when you get away from small cells and go to towers, where you're trying to proliferate more of that through buildings and get a broader coverage, If you look at the wireless plan, for example, there'll be a step down. You know, I used to do nothing but 190-foot towers, and then it was nothing but 150. Then it was nothing but 120. Well, now we're talking about 80-foot towers, which is exactly what the wireless plan said would happen. As you start to get into residential areas, they start dropping down. So we're trying to penetrate into residential areas. And to do that, you still can't quite do that with small cell technology. Justin, did I misstate anything there? So the RF engineer's shaking his head. I didn't miss it by too much, so.
So we're saying that there's, are we saying you can't put 80-foot towers on public rights of way? I mean,
No,
Scott, help me
you
understand.
could. That's possible.
So in theory, they could have a tower on public right of way and we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Not before the planning commission, that's correct.
And it would go to the city commission?
Actually, it's handled administratively through the city engineer's office.
Through the city engineer's office. Okay, so I'm just theoretically here.
Yeah, I mean, I could put the 80-foot tower in front of the building instead of behind.
Yeah.
And, put lease a space from him, yeah, you could do that. I don't think that makes as much sense putting it behind a building, but, it certainly could have that discussion if that's where we needed to
And so
go.
the state law says it's in public rights of way, not necessarily on any piece of public property, I assume. Is that?
The state law applies to wireless facilities regardless of whether they're located on private property or right-of-way. There are differing standards for the two.
I was just wondering where on public property they could put these besides rights of ways. I mean, could they say, we're going to go down to the county engineering yards because that's publicly owned and put one in the middle of that whether you like it or not?
No, publicly owned property that is real property, there is no mandate from the state or the feds that public agencies that own real property allow a wireless facility to be located on that real property, just right-of-way.
It's right of way. So could be a highway, could be any place there.
Rights away, I think,
Which
generally
is-
is the direction they've gone.
Interestingly, the state law does not require the state to allow these on state highways.
Well, of course not. Yeah, right. It doesn't apply to us, right? Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from the commission? Seeing none, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Ferris. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak on this case? Okay, if you'll step forward, state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, if I can interrupt just a second, I wanted to note, no, I'm not taking your time. You all received a packet of material at your seat
Yes.
when you came in, and that was a material that came in late yesterday by email from the District Advisory Board staff and asked that it be provided to you. That was the information that was provided at the District Advisory Board meeting on Monday night. So,
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Harshfield, and my husband and I have owned the property at 1911, 1913 Woodland, which is approximately 6.5 feet from where this cell tower is going to be built. We were also instrumental in helping deny the application of the cell tower at 13th and the Little Arkansas River, adjacent to the Riverside Park. This is also 25 feet from that house that you saw in those drawings. So even if this is light commercial or limited commercial, it is, we have been renting this house out for the last 20 years to families. And we're very concerned that anything falling from this tower, ice on a windy day, it's going to create a hazard for the people who live there. In fact, we've had several people look at it and we said, oh, by the way, there's going to be an 80-foot cell tower right here, and they're going to go, no way. They don't want to be around it for several reasons. The perceived health problems, or real ice falling off, or any other hazards to cars, humans, or pets. This neighborhood is not a fancy neighborhood, but it definitely has character. And the people who live there, as you'll find out from many of them who are very energized by this proposal, and not in a positive way. We feel like this is not doing anything to help the character of the neighborhood. You know, anytime you put a big monopole out there in a right-of-way, it creates, it's unsightly, and it really does not help us do what we want to in that neighborhood. The other thing I'd like to see, to make everybody aware of, is when we were fighting the other cell tower, and we had a meeting at our offices, Exhibit Arts. My husband and I own a business, Exhibit Arts, and we talked to Greg about putting it in other areas in Riverside, and he basically said that nothing in North Riverside would work. The trees were too tall, the neighbors are too tight-knit, the houses are way too close, and T-Mobile had told him to abandon the site, that it was too far from coverage needs, and it needed to be further west. I wish that he would go by what he said those days, because this site
Ma'am?
does need to be abandoned. This is right in the middle
Ma'am?
of a residential.
Your time is up. Would you like an additional 1 minute?
No, I think I've said it all. Thank you so much for your time.
Question?
I'm sorry, my phone is just making noise. Yes, Mr. Green.
Must not be T-Mobile, huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there questions?
Yes.
I thought the axe was going to come down, you know.
No, the axe is not coming down. Mr. Green.
You've owned your property for how many years?
20 years,
How long has it been zoned limited commercial?
the whole time. We haven't changed the zoning on it. There's never been a need to.
Mr. Hartman?
You mentioned you were 6 feet away? Because when I'm looking on this map, it looks like the tower's 10 feet from the building, and it looks like it's...
I'm sorry,
more
sir.
than-
You got to talk louder. I'm deaf.
Okay, you mentioned that the tower would be 6 feet away from your property, but
The tower fence will be 6 feet away from our building and 20 feet away from our house, the way that we went over and measured it the other day.
okay.
Ma'am, you'll have to stay at the podium, please.
Okay, I was going to try to show what.
Yeah, you'll have to use the mouse because
Oh, I
we're
see what you're
recording
saying.
and
Can I-
we won't be able to hear you.
Okay. Okay, my property's right here, the way I see. No, yeah, it's right here, where that arrow is. And see I've got a commercial building right here, which has also been a rental for a person. And then there's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house that sits behind it. The other thing that we would worry about is it also blocks any access, because there's always been kind of an access road there that they're putting this big fence around. If there would ever be a fire in that house, I don't know how they would ever get any emergency services to it.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else from the audience? Okay, if you'll step forward and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name's Betty Park, and I live at 1912 North Burns. And it's hard for me to look at a map and tell you, but the property, Richardson's, and then there's the building here that they're talking about that's vacant, and putting it right behind. My backyard backs right up behind. Yeah.
You stay there.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be my neighbor, that tower, if it goes in. I really don't want a tower as a neighbor. I have grandchildren, great-grandchildren that come over and play. I don't know if that's a hazard to health. I just know, I feel in my heart that it will decrease the value of my property, as well as Richardson's property. So fact, he connected a fence between us to keep people from driving into my yard at one point, which I thanked him for. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I'm not happy about it. And surely there's other spots. There's a great big tower at Twin Lakes. That's all I got.
Ma'am, if you'll stay up just a minute, let me ask if the commissioners have any questions, please.
Okay.
Questions from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Francine Sharp, I live at 1820 Arkansas, and my grandchildren are sixth generation for the neighborhood. Before that, it was Buffalo Bill Mathewson. Anyway, Tom Richardson owns the property that is just to the west and to the south of this property we're talking about, that is going to have the cell tower. And he's been there for 44 years, and he creates and installs custom upholstery specifically for antique automobiles, and his clientele ships cars to him from all over the United States and maybe Europe. And he would like to have been here today, but he had to meet a vehicle that was coming in. Now that road, the chat that is behind the buildings and up to the fence and the business line of the lady that spoke first. That property line is the actual south property line, is right on her cinder block business in the front and her 6-foot fence at the back. That is the property line. Because she did have an air conditioner in one of those rooms, and the man that bought that property to the west of Mr. Richardson, they're divided by 4.5 feet between the buildings. Buildings are not connected. He had her remove the AC out of that business office because it was over the property line into his property. So she did. This cell tower and the site will actually come to within about 4 feet of Mr. Richardson's overhang on the back of his building. He has vehicles that carry, that trailer in vehicles for him to work on that come in that back access road, come into the front, into the back end of his property. Then he has a door on the front that they can access out to 18th Street. So he really needs that. I did visit with the fire department about it because I was concerned, and they said, well, if a fence goes up or if it's there or whatever's in our way, we'll tear it down to get back there. And the cell enclosure will block all the traffic, including the police who use that as a circle drive to for security checks in there. And there was a lady who lived across the street from it, and when she found out Sunday afternoon we were letting people know about the information that was going to happen Monday night and today, she said, you mean I'm going to have to look at that out my front door? She was not too happy. I did find out with my information that we can go 20 feet higher on the tower at Twin Lakes.
Ma'am, your time is up. Would you like an
Thank
additional
you very
1 minute?
much.
Okay. Is there anybody from the commission that has any questions? Yes, Mr. Green.
I'm trying to figure out what road you're talking about that's behind the building. Is there an alley or something there? I don't see any roads other than
Yes,
18th
there
Street
was a
and Woodlawn.
picture that the gentleman showed up here at the very first. I don't know where that is. Oh, okay.
Is that,
This is used, I think, as access around both of these buildings. That is not an alley. It's privately owned by the landowner.
so So people that are driving that and using that, do they have permission to use that from
That I
the
do not
property
know.
owner? Or is it just
It's just
trespassing?
been something that's been going on apparently for years, but it's not a public road nor an alley. It's just something that people have used.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from?
That picture with the car, that's Tom's car, truck, and that's his building and that's his property out the back there.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak on this case? If you'll state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Mr. Yearout, I'd like to have the graphic that Mr. Ferris put in. I'm Susie Cunningham. I'm a longtime Riverside neighborhood. There you go. I think what they're talking about is that for the last 44 years, these people, and 20 years, this one, and you can see this is the compound line here. It goes right up to the property line, and it's going to block this. This is a parking lot, and they have shared this pass-through for semi-trucks that unload cars, or these people had a detailer's business, so there's always a lot of cars, and they went around and around these buildings, and when this is blocked here, this guy is going to not be able to get. They might be able to get in there, but I don't know if they can back all the way back around. I think there may be grounds for a forced easement. You'll have to file the papers, but anyway, I too don't believe that it's consistent with the character of the neighborhood, and I think you two still, under whatever rules and new rules and old rules you cite, you still have the tool to reject on the basis of that it's not consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And if you don't utilize that tool, part of the new rules is that you have to be consistent with all of competition. And this is a geographically contained little neighborhood with very sparse limited commercial sites. It's mostly residential, but we don't have anywhere to grow. So what we do is we take care of what we have. We are why Wichita is a livable community. And we feel like the 150 to 180 foot tower that broadcasts 5 or 10 miles, these giant ones, they've been covering this area fairly well. I too was at the meeting when Mr. Ferris told us that this site was too far west. He didn't think he could make it. He said, if we can't find a spot, we will abandon it, or it's called exhaustion. He also said that he looked at this site and that he told him no, he wouldn't. He refused to put one there, and I don't know how this came back up again, but I'm pretty discouraged that it keeps coming up when the wireless master plan also states that you should look forward when you're deciding to okay these permits, and I hope you don't. It doesn't really it doesn't meet the design guidelines except for the one out of all 9 of them. I think it only meets
Ma'am,
one.
your time is up. Would you like an additional 1 minute?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay.
It's going to go in behind it's an 80-foot pole. It's going in behind a 14-foot tall building. It's flat roofed. The trees around there top out at about 35 feet because they're native elms. Also, they're all deciduous trees, so in the fall, winter, spring, there's no cover. It's just not quite what it appears to be, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Mr. Foster, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious. We haven't heard much information about spotty service or things like that. You mentioned generally good. What kind of problems have you heard neighbors talk about?
Well, I have T-Mobile. I've had it for a long time, and I don't have any problems. I do, however, live south of there quite a ways. I work at North High. Now, they have their own wireless now. It's underground. And that might take some of the load off of that use that we're talking about, the data going up, because kids didn't have adequate service then, and now they do. I'm not hearing it. I hear it more on the east. Actually, a police officer said when he goes east of Waco, he has a problem. So I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I have a copy of that coverage map, I think. Perhaps, if I haven't moved it. Yeah, maybe I don't. If you look at their site, the bright pink shows that it's excellent service, so I don't know.
Any other questions from the commission? Ma'am, can you restate your address, please?
1329 Llewellyn. I'm right on the other side of North High.
Thank you very
Welcome.
much. Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak on this case? You'll step forward and state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Potter. The address I own, the property I own is at 1922 North Woodland. It's just at the 200-foot mark. It was built by my husband's grandfather, Wesley Frederick, back in 1950, and it's been in the family the whole time. So I'm a little taller. So I feel first I need to defend myself as a realtor, because the comments were made earlier that, there hasn't been court cases, blah, blah, blah. It's probably because I've dealt with other realtors in the past on both the buying and the selling side, and I don't think that there's any confusion amongst realtors and amongst the National Association of Realtors that the towers, electric lines and such do present hazards, potential hazards. The electric lines are listed on the National Association of Realtors as potential hazards, and cell towers are stated on the National Association of Realtors website as being having a negative effect on property values. So how much is a whole other thing, whether it has health risks or not is a whole other thing. It is all about the perception of the tenants and the buyers, and we all, I think, would understand that those negative consequences exist for property values. So the negative proof fallacy I wanted to bring up is because a premise cannot be proven true, the premise must be false, or vice versa. I can't sell a property, buy it back, put a tower up, sell it again, and see exactly what the difference is. So the real estate experts in this are the ones who are trying to give you the best information they have from their experience. And I've been a realtor for 10 years, and I know Claire has been a realtor for a lot longer than I have. That being said, I tried to get this paperwork for you guys yesterday, and I was not able to get it until I just went to the 6th floor. So Ron up on the 6th floor has this. I can probably want these back, but I'll pass this out. Westar has already accepted that electric lines and cell towers do have negative impact to property values. Because of that, I was able to pull the easement off of my property. I live out in the country. They were wanting to put up easement where the lines could be extended, including cell towers and metal poles. And I said, well, that's fine, as long as you want to reimburse me my lost property value. And I was dealing with a realtor, and they decided it wasn't worth their while to give me my loss of property value for metal poles. So on my own personal residence, I was able to have it stricken from the easement. And here's my neighbors in front, on either side of me, did not get that done for them, but I did, and I'll pass this around. You can pull the document numbers off the top and get copies for yourself.
Ma'am, your time is up. Do you,
Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you hand that out, we have to have it as an exhibit, so you wouldn't be able to get it back. Okay, that's fine. You said you wanted it back, and
Well, it cost me $3.
we have.
I'll go pay
ma- your time is up. Would you like an additional 1 minute?
Let me see if I covered everything I wanted to say to you. If I could have 1 more minute, I will say that I have, besides being a realtor for 10 years, I've been in property management for 9 years. So what I'm going to have now, as a licensed real estate agent, not every property manager is a licensed real estate agent, and I am a brokerage, I am going to have to now, from here on out, if that tower goes up, disclose to my potential tenants that this cell tower exists, and that is a potential hazard. That is my ethical responsibility as a real estate agent, and I hope that any of you who are real estate agents, or more likely realtors on this board, would communicate to one another on this board the accuracy of what I'm saying on that. Now I'm done.
Thank you. Questions from the commission? Mr. Warren?
Ma'am, I'm 40 years Realtor in
Yes,
the
sir.
Wichita Association of Realtors. My experience, I've never had a problem with towers. The closest that I've come to it has been the high electrical, the really big transmission lines being too close to the transmission lines because of electromagnetic concerns. That's the only time in my 40-year experience that I've ever had a problem or an issue with any kind of poles, powers, anything that concerned people was around those electromagnetic lines. So my experience has not had a problem with normal telephone poles, normal tower poles. It just has not been an issue. So that's my experience. So.
Yeah, I've had different experience. I've done about probably around 75 transactions is all in my career. So real estate transactions, I have had people walk away from properties because it was within half of a mile of, I had the buyers in that situation, half a mile of transformation substation, or, transformer substation, which those are more unsightly. But then a tower that's, 80 to whatever feet tall right next door to your house is definitely, we just have to professionally disagree if you think that wouldn't affect that person's ability to sell. If you have two properties equal, same properties, one has a tower that's 80 foot tall and one that doesn't, to me, even the National Association of Realtors seems to have found enough real estate agents that think that that's an issue to mention it on their website.
Thank you. Other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am. If you'll step up to the podium. That's fine. Just if you'll state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Claire Willenberg, 1402 North Garland. And I've been a resident there most of my numerous years and still live there. I've also been a realtor for at least 30 and very active in the community for at least that long. So a few things I just wanted to say quickly. Oops, Susie, it went off. Oh, there it is. Court case. United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld a denial of a cell tower application based on the testimony of residents and a real estate broker that the tower would reduce values of property in close proximity to the tower. That is cited in the papers that you received. Also, the Appraisal Institute, which is the premier place for appraisers' information. You have in the packet you just got today a letter from a real estate appraiser who's been one of the well-respected appraisers in Wichita for, I would say, at least 20 to 30 years, has written a 2-page letter citing a lot of information from the Appraisal Institute and her opinion that she has to, or not her opinion, her guidelines, that she has to point out things like cell towers as a nuisance and a hazard, and that mortgage companies look at that information. It does have an effect. There is also a lot of information, statistical surveys that utilized some of the same hadrianic types of calculations. It wasn't all surveyed, but the survey that you do have is 1,000 people surveyed who said, given a choice, they would lease or buy away from a cell tower. The way as a realtor, when we go in, if we see something in the environment or with a house down the block that's blighted, we reduce the suggested selling price because we have to compete against homes in better locations. You also have a letter that is from 5, and I'm one of them, realtors. They live in the neighborhood. One of them is a broker for one of the prominent real estate companies in town, not the one I work for, but another competitor. They, without hesitation, signed that they felt that that was a negative influence and out of character for the neighborhood. I'm sorry that we could not bring in the number of people. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not the
Ma'am?
last one. There's one beyond me, and yes, I
Your
would
time-
love one more minute.
One more minute.
Thank you. At the at the DAB meeting, we were able, because it was in the evening, to pull in many more people who were upset about the possibility of changing the character of our neighborhood. They were unable to come today because of work. But there is a lot of opposition. We have a neighborhood Facebook page. So you asked about what the problems are. They were mainly saying only negative, a few comments. I can get cell reception outside, but not inside my home. 5G will help with that. They penetrate better, but they're shorter. So converting to 5G means more towers because they go much less distance. They are, like Verizon just put one in on Seneca and Douglas, and it is on a utility pole. It's a small cell solution, which is going to help with their capacity. That's what we would prefer. Also, the LC
Ma'am, your
was
time is-
there since it was platted, and it's the only LC other than one other location inside the neighborhood. Thank you.
Can you remain at the podium so I can see if the commission has any questions, please?
Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to speak on this case?
More.
State your name and address, please, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm Barbara Hammond. I live at 1427 North Jeanette. I first moved to this neighborhood in 1996. I'm speaking here at the request of the board of the North Riverside Neighborhood Association. I'm a recent past member, and they asked me to represent them today and to ask you to deny this application for conditional use, again, based on maintaining the character of our neighborhood. This has been a very active board for the past 20 years that I know of. I served for 8 years. We have promoted neighborhood activities. We have an excellent ongoing long-term relationship with our community police officer, with our city council member Clay Combe. We've worked with the city on creating 3 separate beautification areas, gardens, and cast concrete signage to represent our neighborhood. There's a lot of pride. It's a small neighborhood bounded between the 2 rivers, the Big River and the Little River, so we're insular, but our Facebook page is huge, attracting people beyond our boundaries because our neighborhood is so active. And again, speaking to the character of the neighborhood, these are primarily small houses. The neighborhood started in 1920s, picked up again in the post-war years after World War II, continued up till the early 70s with smaller sites. But principally the houses are small 2 to 3 bedroom houses, 1 bathroom, detached garages, and narrow streets that were built originally to accommodate 1-car families. So it's a dense neighborhood, very proud, and we just want to emphasize that an 80-foot pole doesn't fit in the character of the neighborhood, and the board would support the idea of waiting to see if smaller, less obtrusive technology could be applied in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commission? All right, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this case? All right, Mr. Ferris, if you'd like to come back up for a 2-minute rebuttal?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I will point out that this area is private property, and whether it's been used in the past or not, it remains private property. The owner of that property has intended to fence off the entire parcel, which would close this access anyway. So that was, he and Mr. Richardson, and I know this because I was working with Mr. Richardson to put a tower on his property, but we couldn't get access because that wasn't his access. So we decided that this location would be better. It also was further from the residential, so it seemed to fit a little better. So the idea of whether or not that access is going to be blocked, the fire department would have access to that. They will not. They do not today unless they just use it because it's there. So whether I fence it off with my tower or the owner fences it off because he wants to secure his property, that's his right. And we'll do that in the future as well. I will also point out that 5G technology is a speed. It is not a power, and I'll be glad to have the RF engineer explain that to you so that when 5G comes, it's not going to increase the ability to penetrate buildings. It's a speed issue. Also would like to tell you that, if I can get to that, wrong direction. Someone said that this tower would be within 20 feet of their property. From this line to this line is 44 feet. If the tower is now going to be placed here, we're moving it over to here to get it further away from any of the properties. From here to here would be in excess of 50 feet, and to the building that's there would be closer to 60 feet, so that anything falling off of that property would be on, and we don't have a lot of that happen, but I'm not going to tell you it's never going to happen. But to fall from here to here, or to fall from here to here is very unlikely, and so that's really not a very good way to look at this. So because we're not within, the fence will be on the property line.
Mr. Ferris, your time is up.
I might just have one extra minute, just because there was a lot of things they covered, and I want to make sure that, may I have 1 minute?
Thank you.
The other issue is that we're not talking about coverage here, we're talking about capacity, and there's a big difference. So when you're looking at what we need, it's not about coverage. The last thing I'd like to point out is that when you talk about cell towers, there's a cell tower at Twin Lakes, which we're on. We can't go on that. Doesn't matter if we raise it or whatever. We're already on there. That cell tower is about 170 feet, I think. You go over to Broadway, there's a tower, it's 200 feet. It's a lattice tower. So when you just say cell tower to somebody, we're not talking about an 80-foot, because we don't have very many 80-foot cell towers in Wichita. People don't have that in their mindset when you talk about a tower. So when you have 56-foot tall poles already, this pole is not going to impact that character, and that mindset may be, oh, there's a cell tower, but once it's built, it's, oh, that's not that big. So it's not like the one at Twin Lakes. It's not like the one on Broadway. So just wanted to point those out. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Blick.
I have a question for your RF expert. Just the biggest concern, as I heard, is health concern. And what's the difference between that and maybe like a cell phone or Wi-Fi in somebody's home?
I'm not going to let him come up because I'm going to answer that for you.
Okay.
Because you're not allowed to consider RF emissions or those safety issues. The FCC has determined that local jurisdictions cannot consider those things in a zoning case. And the reason is they've determined that those are safe. Just to tell you, though, that a cell tower will put out about the RF emissions of a microwave oven. So that'll tell you how, but I'm not going to argue with her about perception. I mean, because everybody says, oh, they're dangerous, they're dangerous, they're dangerous. If you say it 1,000 times, then people are going to believe that. The FCC has determined that they are not dangerous, that they have studied them, they have looked at it, and they have said that local jurisdictions are not to consider safety issues as far. Now, if you want to consider safety issues, stuff falling, that's a different issue. That's not RF emissions.
Foster.
Two questions. You mentioned that this is a capacity issue, and my understanding of the small cell and the DAS facilities in right-of-way is that's what they're supposed to assist with, so why wouldn't?
That's a good
that type
question.
of
That's really a great question, Mr. Foster. Let me address that a little bit. because a small cell does not, they don't have the power to penetrate buildings. They do handle capacity for people milling in an area, because they can put out a signal that people can use. So that's why, like in Bricktown, they use those because those are pedestrians. So you use these in high traffic areas where people are driving by, and that alleviates that capacity. Or you use them in areas where there's a high volume of foot traffic, because then that's eliminating it. But when you're trying to deal with capacity issues in a building, small cells do not accomplish that because they can't create enough power to get through the walls. Did that help you?
Another question, Mr. Foster?
Just second question is,
To make a comment about what the question that Mr. Foster asked, I think it's fine to ask the question to understand, but do keep in mind that the state law prohibits the planning commission from dictating the type of transmission equipment.
second question is, I keep coming back to the school question, and Riverside is one of those special neighborhoods. I lived there for a decade or more. And my question there is there not a broader thought process here that, given schools are a public entity, that they could be looked upon to aid in this
Mr.
tough
Foster,
quest
we
of
can't
getting
ask
things
that
located?
question. We can't tell him that he has to go somewhere else that you think's better. The only question you have is whether this site is appropriate or not.
State law.
Under state law, we cannot.
I can read, I've got the law in front of me here. It says the planning commission cannot evaluate an application based on the availability of other potential locations.
And Mr. Foster, even though you can't consider that, I will, and that's why I put it in my documentation. We did look, and we did talk to the school and spend a lot of time with the school. I mean, personally, I spent a lot of time because I have to develop a candidate package, and they're not easy to do. So I know that we would have done that. So we can say all day long, we would like it to be on the school, and even if you could say that, it doesn't matter. The school's not going to let you go there. So it's pretty simple.
Other questions?
Thank you very much. If you have any
Thank you.
questions during discussion, we'll be available.
Thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Mr. Warren, a second by Mr. Green. Discussion. Mr. Foster.
I think the last bit of the discussion really helped me solidify my thinking on this. This is one of those compromised locations. This has been a tough one to locate. But the last bit of discussion there helped me, that I'm going to offer a substitute motion to disapprove the application as presented.
Do I have a second on that? Okay, so dies for lack of a second. Mr. Bill Johnson.
Well, I think we all use this equipment, and we're going to have to make it where it works. This particular case is right in LC zoning. If these are residential homes in residential zoning, I maybe look at it a little bit different. The other thing is it wasn't a workshop, but a meeting here a couple of weeks ago for an hour and a half, and cell towers come out, but it sounds like Wichita's probably more restrictive than a lot of cities in this state. And maybe even to the point maybe we're asking for stuff that we can't ask for. So with staff agreeing that this is okay, I'm going to support the motion.
Other discussion.
I agree with Mr. Johnson.
Right. If no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so we have
I didn't hear any votes.
10-1.
carries 10-1.
Mr. Foster.
Yes. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 7, case number ZON 2019-00002. Philip's going to present on this case.
Good afternoon, Philip Zevenbergen with planning staff. We have a request to change the zoning on the subject property from SF5 single family to NO neighborhood office with the intended use of a chiropractic clinic as well as a personal residence. The site is located about 1,000 feet south of 29th Street North, and it's directly west of North Tyler Road, as you can see here. Currently is owned by the Mays School District. They are looking to sell it to 777 Management LLC, contingent on this rezoning case. The property has been vacant since 2007, or 2017, I'm sorry. After the May school year was over, USD 266 no longer utilized this property for educational purposes. The site consists of an educational building structure here and the existing original residence here as well. The residence building was used as associated office space for the educational functions in the building to the north. The site around this structure has TF3 zoning directly to the north with duplexes. You have SF5 zoning directly behind it with single-family homes. There's limited commercial up at the corner of 29th and Tyler. And then there's also neighborhood office directly south. It's a dentist office. And directly across the street is zone neighborhood office, but it's a single family home. And I have site pictures here. Here's site
Philip?
pictures. Yes, ma'am?
Can you hold on just a second?
Yes.
Was there somebody from the commission that wanted to hear this case?
I think one of them ladies raised her hand when she
Okay.
was on the
It
road.
was
I was like the
That's what
public
That's-
raised their hand to hear this case.
That's what, we think there was a gentleman back in the corner that raised his hand that he wanted to hear this case, and he's no longer here. And so,
I'm happy to not present if the commission does not want to hear this case. I will do what the commission decides.
Check, see
so
if
is there anybody that would like to hear this case on the commission? No. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to hear this case?
Fantastic.
Motion to approve.
Hey,
No problem.
Motion approved.
hey, we have a motion by Mr. Blick, a second by Mr. Klossmeyer to approve. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much for your half of a presentation. Okay, I think we have no other items on the agenda. With that, we are adjourned.